So I appreciate the explanation, and I was wondering if there are any examples or sort of real life examples or case studies that you can share, specifically related to the gig economy. Like basically, how does Argyle help, gig workers, get better deals or get better underwriting or get better financial products? I'm curious if you can share any examples.
Sure, absolutely. We work we work with a number of providers who exclusively serve the gig economy
Mm-hmm.
space. So I'll bring up one example is a company called Moves Financial.
Mm-hmm.
Moves provides loans specifically for gig workers,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this has been traditionally a difficult place to operate in. Gig workers have not had access to affordable places of credit.
Mm-hmm.
Their options are limited to payday lenders,
Yeah.
and I think part of that is in payday lenders come with very high APR, um, bad terms. Part of that is because some of them are predatory, but also part of that is because they're operating in the dark. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of information to underwrite individuals on. So Moves has a really great model where they can now offer gig workers affordable credit as a result of having transparency through Argyle to
Mm-hmm.
see how much money is somebody making, how consistently are they working, what's their rating on
Yeah.
Uber, using information like their name, their date of birth to do their KYC checks
Mm-hmm.
or fraud checks. So all of those things are pieces of data that Moves would use to underwrite gig workers.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think the financial and insurance underwriting is sort of like, it seems to me like very obvious, how those companies would kind of use this data and how it kind of benefits not only the gig workers for sure, but also the companies and, just I think allows them to lend more, more consistently. I think it really improves everything for everyone. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the podcast, though, is because I feel like with this type of data, from consumers and from these gig workers, it opens up a number of opportunities, right? Like I kind of imagine that, just off the top of my head, right? Like if I'm a company that only wants to hire 4.9 star rated Uber and Lyft drivers, boom, I integrate with Argyle. And now I can see, not only which drivers are 4.9 star rated, but, I can see how much they're earning on average per hour and pay them more to come work for my company, right? And that's literally just one I thought off the top of my head, which is actually a pretty good idea now that I'm saying it, if anyone is listening. But, it just seems like it opens up a lot of really cool opportunities for not only the gig economy, but to sort of, allow workers to leverage their time, leverage their money, leverage their experience. Whereas in the past, you could be 4.9 on, Uber and have 25,000 trips and nobody cares, right?
Exactly. I think we talk to customers all the time about what's possible on this platform, and
Mm-hmm.
our customers and our prospects are the most creative, and they come up with new solutions every day, which is part of what's really fun about this business.
Yeah.
Other use cases that you may not have thought of that folks have come to us with, or think like insurance collections.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult for insurers to verify whether somebody was on a job and therefore covered,
Mm.
right? You can now see that with work history data, or what you're bringing up, job platforms or HR platforms. Think if somebody applied for a job and you could say, hey, this person is verified to have worked for Uber. They work
Yeah.
these hours. They have this rating. It gives somebody who's hiring a lot more transparency. It also, we work with some job marketplaces who say, hey, this driver, I can see when you're working. I can see how much money you want to be making. I can help give you access to the type of job postings that we think will align well with your work habits.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've seen a number of companies kind of mention that they were looking into working with Argyle, or, have told me that they're thinking about working with or are working with Argyle. And, the possibilities really are endless. And so I'm really excited for that future and to kind of see what, it's obviously, as it takes a little bit of work to get it from the idea stage to the product and then out to hundreds, if not thousands of drivers. But I will say there's some really cool stuff on the horizon. It does seem like, though, with the gig economy specifically, like if you're a Walmart employee, like pulling your work history and data seems pretty straightforward. I think the integration with Argyle still makes a lot of sense, but it's kind of like, how much you made, how much you worked. It seems like with the gig economy, there's a lot more, I guess you would say, rich data. Like you mentioned, you can see when, I didn't even think about the insurance use case, right? You can see when someone is on or off a trip, right? Like a lot of insurance companies now. So to become an Uber and Lyft driver, you just need regular auto insurance. Although you probably want to get rideshare insurance. But if you call, if you get into an accident and you call Geico just as a normal human being, one of the screener questions they ask you is if you've been working for Uber and Lyft, right? And so I could kind of imagine, a future in which it's like, okay, we need to verify, if you've worked for Uber and Lyft. What are some of the interesting or, like quickly some of the data points that you can actually pull for gig workers specifically when they're integrating through Argyle that might not be apparent?
Yeah, it, oftentimes this question of who pays you or putting Argyle is the first question that some of our customers will ask their applicants, whether
Yeah.
that somebody is applying for a bike lease or a
Hmm.
car or a loan or insurance, because there's just a lot of data you can then pull out to
Right.
auto-populate a lot of other things that you may have asked that applicant otherwise. So, we break up the data that we're able to pull into profile information or
Hmm.
personal information. So think facts about an individual.
Hmm.
You can also see activity level information. So for a W-2, this would be a shift, but
Hmm.
activity level information for a gig worker would be every trip that that person does,
Yeah.
including the location, time, amount, earnings accrued during that trip. And then lastly, we can pull payout information.
Hmm.
So, gross, net taxes, how much has an individual earned
Yeah.
and deposited into their bank account.
And I guess the nice thing is that a lot, or basically all of this data is kind of going to be used in a positive manner for the gig worker or whoever is the end consumer because they're opting into it, right? Like you aren't going to
Exactly.
opt into using the service if it's something that's going to kind of harm you negatively, right?
Yeah, we don't want this to feel Big Brother-esque,
Hmm.
and that's part of why we're building a user permission system.
Right.
We really feel, and the mission that we're on as a company is to say, hey, worker, W-2
Hmm.
worker, 1099 worker, you have a lot of very valuable information that you're sitting on. Go and harness that,
Yeah.
use that to get access to the products and services that you deserve.
Right. I think we've used a lot of the buzzwords, right? Data, privacy. So that kind of makes me think of like, what are, I wouldn't say drawbacks, but what are the concerns like that you guys are thinking about? Okay, we're building this product. Like, what data or privacy concerns do we need to take into account to, either make sure that this doesn't get into the wrong hands or that users feel that they're not going to be taken advantage of? Like, obviously, I'm sure some people have brought up some concerns. So I'm curious to know what you're hearing from your users and kind of what you guys are doing to mitigate some of that.
Yeah, we think of data security and compliance as a core feature of the product, not
Hmm.
an obstacle. It's built into everything that we do, from how we think about encryption and data storage, how we transfer this information. We use military grade security across our entire system. From I think the other big piece here is, what does consent mean? And we're very upfront with saying, hey, user, by using this system, you're transferring this type of information to the third party. And we
Right.
surface that to a consumer. They click the button, continue. So it makes it clear what they're using and what's being transferred on their behalf.
Hmm. And I guess it's also important to note that you guys aren't necessarily aggregating or working with any of this data. It's all with third parties, right? Like you guys, how do you describe yourself as the layer in between a third party and a consumer, or how do you look at it?
We call ourselves, we're the trains and the
Hmm.
train tracks. And you put the cargo on the train, and we've built the tracks, and you tell us where to take that cargo, and we drive it there. We don't
Got
do
it.
anything else with that cargo. We don't sell the cargo. We don't aggregate the cargo. We just take the cargo wherever that user wants us to take it. So if
Got
they
it.
say, I want you to take it to Moves Financial, we
Hmm.
move it there. If a user says, hey, I no longer want you to have access to this data, which some users do, they go in and they disconnect accounts, then, again, we are a user permission service. So we would go in and delete all data associated with that user.
Got it. And I'm curious if early on in the company, or maybe even it's on the future of the roadmap, is there ever, I guess a product or a service that you guys have considered that would make it worth it for you to aggregate some of that data or sort of, kind of take on some of that role? Or do you envision yourselves as always like connecting the two groups?
There's plenty to play in with moving information from point A to point B. And
Hmm.
that's what's on our roadmap for now. What we spend most of our time doing is that 50 million number I gave you.
Yeah.
We want that, or that third of Americans, we want that to be 100% or as close
Got
to
it.
100% as possible. That's what we spend our time thinking is we want every worker to be able to use this system if they wanted to.
Got it. Very cool. So